Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to discuss the worksheet on Kant for Activity 3.6. Before you go any farther, make sure you have completed the worksheet, the Kant worksheet, to the best of your ability and are following along, ideally with a copy of the worksheet open in another window. Okay, so Immanuel Kant. Let's start with a question. And of course, my dog Finn. You thought I forgot. What is the difference between the dog that exists in reality and the dog that exists in our minds? Well, what would Berkeley say? Berkeley would say that there cannot be a relevant distinction between existence and perception. Esse est percipi. Existence is perception. So the two are one and the same. But saying the dog is in our minds does not mean it isn't real or that it ceases to exist when one of us isn't looking at it. This is because for Berkeley, God ensures the persistence of things even when they aren't being observed by humans. Besides, Finn probably perceives himself somehow, so no need to worry. Now, what would Hume say? Hume would say that perhaps there might be a conceptual distinction between a dog that exists in reality and a dog that exists only in our minds. But since we cannot be sure that any existing thing is the cause of any perception, because he doubts cause, then we don't really know if the dog exists in reality. Both Berkeley and Hume leave us with difficult challenges. For Hume, we don't know that any given perception is caused by an existing thing. And for Berkeley, there isn't even any difference between existing things and mere perceptions. It seems like a mind-independent real world is inaccessible to us if we take these philosophers seriously. Kant accepts this to be true. He was heavily influenced by Hume in particular, who he claims awoke him from his dogmatic slumbers. He says, mind-independent reality, or in his language, the noumenal world, is inaccessible to us, and we can know nothing about it. But it is the source of our sensations, our perceptions, and ultimately our ideas. In this sense, he is an empiricist. He thinks that knowledge, if we can get it, comes from our sensations, but we don't know where that sense data comes from. A good metaphor is to think about it this way. Our sense data is sent to us in an envelope with no return address. We can't pinpoint its origin, but we know it came from somewhere out there. This is all we can say about the noumenal world. So philosophers should really just stop talking about it. However, Kant doesn't think that this is the end of the conversation. He says that there is a reality that is accessible to us, the reality of our minds. He calls this the phenomenal reality. Our minds are set up in such a way that we can discover a priori truths about our experiences simply through a process of reasoning. For instance, the clearest example is mathematics. Once we learn the Pythagorean theorem and truly understand it, we can apply it to solve problems in new and interesting ways. Indeed, mathematics continues to evolve, not because mathematicians are like scientists uncovering new evidence from the world, but simply because they are thinking about things in a new way and solving problems, coming up with new equations. Kant argues that we can have a priori knowledge of a number of things, not just math. Firstly, Descartes showed that we can have a priori knowledge of the self through the cogito ergo sum argument. And hopefully you remember what that argument is. You can go back and review it if you're not sure. Secondly, Kant argues that time and space are not features of the noumenal world, the world out there. Instead, time and space, or we're talking about time and space, are actually a necessary part of the structure of the phenomenal world. we necessarily experience things through time and space, and we wouldn't be able to conceive of the world otherwise. Perhaps some other being out there somewhere can think of things outside of time and space, but human consciousness is bound by these concepts. Similarly, Kant challenges Hume on causation. He thinks that we cannot doubt the reality of cause and effect because it is necessary for logic and reason. Our entire reality is built on this foundation, and so similarly to time and space, causation is necessary for the phenomenal reality. With regards to concepts like infinity, necessity, possibility, Kant thinks that these concepts are necessary categories of thought. We can't really think without necessity and possibility. And infinity, even if you haven't ever thought of it before, it's still a concept that is there to be discovered through our minds. It's not, you'd never observe infinity, that would be impossible. Finally, ethics is a bit of a harder sell, but he maintains that there is a universal ethical code that applies to all rational human beings. Those who disagree, he thinks, are irrational. Now, there have been a lot of challenges to Kant's ethics, and we'll take that up a little bit more in the ethics unit. And we'll just leave it at that for now. Overall, Kant completely changes the conversation in philosophy. For one, he combines empiricism and rationalism in a completely new theory. He shows that these schools of thought can work together and don't need to be in opposition. He is an empiricist because he thinks ultimately that our sensations provide us with the substance of our knowledge. But he is a rationalist because he thinks that we can learn new things simply by discovering the rational structure of our minds, or in other words, our phenomenal reality. Secondly, Kant changes the focus of philosophy from a focus on describing the nature of an external reality and considering the possibility of knowledge to instead an examination of the nature of experience itself and discovering universal principles that can be applied to this experience. This is sometimes called Kant's Copernican revolution. Copernicus was an early astronomer who first hypothesized that the sun, rather than the Earth, is at the center of the solar system, which we now know to be true. Similarly, Kant argued for a complete shift in focus from explaining the external world to explaining the internal world of human experience. A long line of philosophers were heavily influenced by Kant. Some expanded on his ideas, others criticized them, of course, but none denied that he was an intellectual giant. That's it. Thanks.